I presume you're here in order to learn of Magecraft. I'll have you know, there's no room for the weak-willed in this course, and despite your best efforts, the sorcery of our time is but a fraction of what it once was in the Age of Gods. Much of the craft is established through pedigree, and the culture of mages is riddled with deception and moral depravity. That said, if you insist, I shall do my best to educate you in this miserable, yet fascinating world.
In our previous lesson, I covered the ominous practice of sealing designations. Those who are captured in this process are taken to the Carillon Observatory, which happens to be a strategic location for all the flourishing mana found in Albion. It is important for mages to be aware of where mana flows throughout our planet, given how our own internal mana, or ode, can only take us so far. Thus, for today's lesson, I will cover mana Leylines and how mages have used them to their advantage. After all, Leylines are taught to mages of the Clock Tower through Misteel, the Department of General Fundamentals. It is common knowledge all mages need to understand in order to succeed. As you should already know, mana exists on Earth because it's produced by the world, better known as Gaia. However, the mana it creates is not evenly distributed. While much of it has leaked to the atmosphere, the majority of Earth's mana remains concentrated within Leylines, also sometimes called dragon veins. Scholars have referred to Leylines as the planet's breathing, heartbeat, and even its brain. Personally, I find it best to imagine Leylines coursing through the Earth like blood vessels. In another sense, they happen to be the planet's very own magic circuits. The location and state of these Leylines have dictated much of our world geography. Mages settle in spiritual lands where Leylines are especially strong or intersect. Over time, these places become hotbeds of worship and civilization, but ideally, mages hope to keep spiritual lands to themselves. That way, the land's flourishing nature can be preserved. In a loose sense, the Mages Association has taken control over most of the world's best Leylines. That said, actually governing these many territories falls to local families who pledge allegiance to the association. Such loyalty is never guaranteed, like when the Yigida Millennia clan rebelled against the association. Still, it goes to reason that the association's headquarters, the Clock Tower, was built upon Britain's Leyline cavern, Albion. Deep down at the Carillon Observatory, a mystic code connects with Britain's Leylines, expanding outward to detect traces of mana being used the world over. This connection is important for research and defense, as mages often need to rely on the Earth as a greater source of mana than they can provide by themselves. For as united as the association is, mages still fight each other to establish territory. Their control over the land is just as valuable as their individual skills, which is how long-running families tend to maintain their dominion. For example, the mage Toko Aozaki is one of the world's strongest mages, at least when you look at her individual capabilities. It's scary then to consider she isn't even the true successor of her family. That honor goes to her sister Aoko, who lives in Misaki Town and maintains control of the land with help from the Kuonji family. Upset at not inheriting this privilege, Toko once tried to fight her sister, starting first by weakening the town's control over the local Leylines. Otherwise, even with her superior strength, she would be going in at a disadvantage. The two sisters were willing to put their lives on the line over a territory dispute. In order to conduct Grail Wars, it's necessary to do so at venues with adequate mana. Fuyuki, Japan, specifically the Leylines at Mount Enzo, for instance, was needed to hold the 5 main Holy Grail Wars. There's a reason why Ryudo Temple, which had been built along the mountain, acts as the Leylines' keystone. It is one of 4 possible places where the Grail can actually manifest in the city. The strength of a land's Leylines dictates how many servants can be summoned in a Grail War. For example, Fuyuki's Leylines allow for 7 servants. Even though its Greater Grail had a backup system that would activate in the event of a conspiracy between mages, summoning an additional 8 servants would put strain on the Leyline. In Romania, however, there was more than enough mana throughout the city of Trifas to facilitate a great Holy Grail War. This is less that Fuyuki's land is weak, and more that the Yigida Millennia faction had spent years gathering mana into their Leylines. Mind you, Leylines don't release infinite mana. Something as large as a Grail War can drain them, and it takes years for them to replenish. As such, a quick way to sabotage a Grail War is to target the Leylines. Kiritsugu Emiya planned to do this exact thing following Fuyuki's Fourth War. He planted explosives to disturb the Leylines, provoking the onset of an earthquake 30 years later. However, because the Fourth War ended prematurely, the Fifth War started only 10 years later. Kiritsugu's plan failed. Ultimately, it was Waver Velvet and Rin Tosaka who would finally dismantle the Greater Grail. Still, as Kiritsugu's plan suggests, damaging a ley line can destroy the land around it. This concept was immortalized when the goddess Ishtar used her noble phantasm, Angaltaki Galshe, to thrust a spear into the main ley line of Mount Ebi, collapsing the entire thing with a single strike. As you can see, ley lines aren't just tools for making Grail Wars. They have many other uses. For one, the Mystic Eye train, Rail Zeppelin, actually runs on the planet's ley lines as its tracks. This allows the train to travel routes that would otherwise be impossible. By that same token, should these ley lines get disrupted, the train will be forced to make an emergency stop. Dr. Heartless, aka Kuro Arashino, took advantage of this to create an imitation Holy Grail. Despite not being in Fuyuki, he was able to tap into the Greater Grail through the ley lines, allowing him to summon his very own servant into the Faker class. Of course, to pull something like this off, one needs to know where these ley lines are. Generally, mages can learn to detect nearby ley lines. Even ones who are weak, like Waver Velvet, can specialize in finding them. This helped him survive the Fourth Holy Grail War. When his servant Iskandar had exhausted his mana in a prior battle, Waver knew to visit a secluded ley line in the forest and rest there. In this case, the ley line compensated for his insufficient ode. Leyline saved him again years later when he was captured by a mage named Barzan. By disrupting a dormant ley line, he caused a swarm of evil spirits to run wild and attack his captors. Despite this, a mage like Waver can't compare to a goddess. Medusa was a former Earth goddess, and as a servant, she has a more sensitive connection to the planet. It lets her easily sense disturbances in nearby ley lines. Ironically, however, her blood fort Andromeda actually damages the ley lines it surrounds. As a result, she can never reactivate it in the same place twice. The mage Yvette L. Lehrman uses gems to create artificial mystic eyes. Her Iolite eye, in particular, strengthens her ability to see mana, and by extension, ley lines. Kairi Shishigo, a necromancer who fought in the Great Grail War of Trifus, has an affinity for underground tombs and catacombs. Much to his own servant's dismay, Kairi knew these catacombs had the highest quality ley lines around. Setting up camp there kept them safe and efficiently replenished their mana. Sometimes technology is needed to study ley lines on a broader scale. The Animosphere are a family of stargazers who observe the planet and predict its future. Olga Marie Animosphere carries a small mystic code that can map the Earth's ley lines onto a projection. This concept is applied on a larger scale with Caldeus, which can analyze not just the current ley lines, but those of the past and future. The Chaldea Security Organization uses this to help their masters find ley lines within singularities. It is a critical strategy for Chaldean masters to locate and establish ley line terminals. These are needed for communication and establishing summoning circles. In addition, the Animosphere family owns an offshore oil rig named Seraphix. This facility gathers resources for Chaldea, but its main purpose is to investigate ley lines. Seraphix researchers seek to connect a mage's circuits to the ley lines. Since magic circuits are bound to a mage's soul, it's possible to interface with the planet's soul by connecting with its circuits. Once you find a ley line, the next step is to use it. Let's go over some ways in which this is done. Paracelsus von Hohenheim was an alchemist who created magical items, including the Philosopher's Stone. By connecting a ley line to his territory, he could mass-produce magical jewels. During the Fifth Grail War in Fuyuki, Medea used her skill, territory creation, to make Ryudo Temple her base of operations. This was necessary because her master, Soichiro Kuzuki, was not a proper mage. At best, he could only anchor her to the world, not provide her with mana. Instead, Medea drew her mana from Fuyuki's ley lines, which wound up being far more than a master could possibly provide. She surrounded the temple with a barrier, hoping to keep the Leylines to herself, but there was a catch. To channel the Leylines, she needed to leave them a pathway into the temple. This forced her to leave a gap in the barrier where intruders could enter. Luckily, these Leylines were potent enough that she could summon her own assassin servant to guard the entrance. This servant was, by consequence, unable to leave the temple gate without vanishing. A similar dilemma occurred in the past with a Grail War known as the Waxing Moon Ritual. It was a makeshift system established by an Onmyo-jin referencing knowledge of the future. As a byproduct, Japan's capital Edo summoned various rogue servants to keyline terminals, also called spirit fonts. They too could not leave their respective zones without being severely weakened. They could, however, travel to an extent with the help of a mage chaining together various Leylines. Perhaps more than any other city, Edo was built as a city of Magecraft, relying on Leylines surging throughout Japan's Kanto region. To win the Waxing Moon, participants needed to connect spirit fonts together, expanding their scope of influence before invading other territories. The ritual's overseer, Tsuchimikado Yasuhiro, was able to take control of Edo's Leylines to possess nearly all of the rogue servants to fight on his behalf. Lost belts, timelines that the universe would otherwise prune, can remain bound to proper human history by artifacts named fantasy trees. These trees lodge themselves into the earth and connect with its Leylines to expand a lost belt's scope of influence. The stronger the tree, the stronger its respective lost belt. In a similar fashion, the servant known as Vlad III has a skill called Demonic Defender of the State. It allows him to claim a region's Leylines as his own before a fight. In this capacity, he was able to transform modern Trefus into the land he once ruled over, granting him home turf advantage during the Great Grail War. In much the opposite fashion, Lost Belt ruler Qin Shi Huang limited the influence of China's Leylines by raising a civilization without heroes. This prevented the Throne of Heroes from connecting with the Leylines. In doing so, he prevented Chaldea from summoning reinforcements. That was, until the heroic sacrifice of Spartacus rekindled the people's hope, re-establishing the throne's connection to the Lost Belt. The goddess Kukulkan uses her noble phantasm, Kinshi Ahau Impact, to channel all the Leylines of South America, fueling her transformation into a massive, luminous body. The Greek machine gods, on the other hand, chose to create their own Leylines. At their base of Olympus, they constructed a crystalline mountain filled with a wireless network of divine-made Leylines. This was advantageous, as only they could utilize the mana from these Leylines, giving the gods even more dominion over mankind, preserving the Age of Gods in their Olympian Lost Belt. Sadly, us mortals are stuck doing things the hard way. The spiritual land known as Snowfield, Nevada, has long been cared for by an indigenous tribe calling themselves the Protectors of the Land. These people forged a contract with the land, linking their magic circuits to Snowfield's Leylines in order to wield strong Magecraft without the need to chant incantations. In exchange, however, the villagers sacrifice tens of thousands of children. Even those that survive, such as the priestess Tine, are bound to the land for life. They cannot leave without dying. In summation, Gaia provides our Earth with mana, most of which flows through a system of planetary veins known as Leylines. By learning how to detect and channel these Leylines, mages can accomplish far greater feats than they could on their own. This includes grand rituals like the Holy Grail Wars. The Mages Association claims dominion over most of the world's Leylines, but that control flows vicariously through local families that individually manage designated areas. Maintaining a spiritual land with fruitful Leylines allows prominent families to prosper across generations. It is also crucial that mages build their own workshops atop mana Leylines. Because of this, I will dedicate our next lesson to clarifying what these workshops are and what they entail. Thanks for watching.
If you enjoy this channel, help us grow by liking, commenting, sharing the video, subscribing to Otaku Daikun, and
most of all, smashing that notification bell so you don't miss out on all our anime lore, discussions, and Let's Play content.
you can support us directly through Patreon, Subscribestar, or a YouTube membership, all of which come with benefits like spicy exclusive vids and early access.
As always, celebrate your fandom. I want to give a special shout out to all my $10 and up supporters: Video Gamer 75, Dante Pendragon, Stephen Elak, Samuel Gersten, The Nonchalant Ostrich, Otaku Mom, Jens Bauman, Mystic Samurai 1983, Lord Ormagoden, Freebrick, Alexis Yukio Gomez Yamato, Link Pendrago, Olympian Doll, Observer Bellis, James Hewitt, Uncanny EXP, King Kobo, Scout, Jared Kraus, Zamas Autonomous, Yuki Aidos, Crow Kalem, Saul Soto, Tristan Riggin, Sogai CH, Caitlin P, Vladimir Rovna, The Taz 96, Kengo X 77, Hersha of E-Rated Hands, Alester Bernadotte, and Akakaze Yume. Thank you all so much.